Hello, everyone, and welcome to our new series called Perspectives. We would like to begin with our land acknowledgement, and I would also like to take time to mention that right outside the auditorium, you should have possibly received an event survey. Here at BEMA, we constantly strive to improve our art and visitor experience for everyone, so we hope you can take a minute before you leave tonight to fill out a survey. BEMA would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the Suk-Opsh people of clear salt water. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers, the Suk-Opsh live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suk-Opsh live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Thank you for taking that moment with us. As always, BEMA thanks their sponsors, Kitsap County, Prism, and Kobe for their support, and of course, tonight's event would not be possible without all of you who support the arts. So thank you. Our next Perspectives series installment will be a dramatic play reading titled Light Through the Cellar Door on August 29th. Tickets are still on sale, and we hope to see you there. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome up Britney Daniels to the stage.
I took a ferry for the first time today. Yeah, thank you. I made it. At 6 a.m. I started off in Chicago, and here I am. So, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm going to talk, and don't let me talk too much, because I have to get that ferry back so I can get home by 6 a.m. tomorrow for my dog. My name is Britney Daniels. I'm author of Journal of a Black Queer Nurse, 192 pages of me griping and bringing about, the lack of awareness that a lot of folks have regarding what happens within the walls of a hospital and the hospital system. And no one expects anyone to know what happens because you're not in there often, hopefully. And if you are, you shouldn't be experiencing the things that I talk about in this book. So we're going to talk about my identities as a human and how that affects my work every day. We'll talk about in which ways nursing and healthcare are failing our country and our communities, and we'll also talk about why I wrote the book in the first place. Okay? All right, let's do it. I have to pull out my outline, otherwise I'll just talk, y'all. All right. So after I wrote this book and folks started reaching out to me about speaking publicly, one of the things that I committed myself to was uplifting the names of people who have been killed or have died at the hands of first responders, hospital personnel, and otherwise. So hopefully you've heard the name Sonia Massey, is a woman in Springfield, not far from where I live. She called 911 because she thought she heard someone outside of her home. And ultimately, one thing led to another, and a police officer shot her in the face. And she died on her kitchen floor. And she did nothing to harm anyone. She didn't threaten anyone. There are a lot of factors that play into what happened with Sonia Massey, but at the end of the day, the truth is that she should not be dead. She should still be alive. So one of the things I always do at the beginning of my talks is I say their names, which is a hashtag, right, of course. So Sonia Massey, Earl Moore Jr., also a Springfield, Illinois man who was at home suffering from alcohol withdrawal, and 911 was called to help him, and he ended up being forced onto a gurney or stretcher, depending on what side of the country you live on. I learned that you can say gurney or you can say stretcher. In Chicago, I say stretcher, but when I came to California, they said that that's not what they say gurney. So whatever, a bed on wheels, okay? And they put him face down and then strapped him in really tight. And he suffocated in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. And by the time they arrived at the hospital, he was deceased. So Earl Moore Jr., Dee Dee Hall, the transgender woman who was killed, also died in an ambulance. And to me, the irony of, right, someone who was alive when they got into an ambulance dying in the ambulance is just insane. But Tyra Hunter, this dates back to, I think it was 1965. 1995. She was in a car accident. The paramedics showed up when they cut her clothes off, which is something we do frequently. I work in the emergency department. We cut clothes off when there's a trauma because we don't want to exacerbate any injuries or anything like that by trying to bend arms to get shirts off or bend legs to get pants off. So we just cut them. Well, when the paramedics cut Tyra's pants, they found that her anatomy was not matching what her, outside presentation was. So they stopped helping her, and she died of an injury that could have been prevented or treated in the field or at the hospital. So Tyra Hunter. I don't mean to start this off on such a dark note, but one thing that I am committed to is making sure that I raise awareness to these folks who have died at the hands of folks who were supposed to take care of them. Thank you for that. So, who I am and how it shapes what I do. I'm going to start this part with a story. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My sister and I were doing fine. I'm a twin, but a lot of our cousins were getting into trouble. They were getting into drugs, gangs, all that. And with there not being after school programs or any extracurriculars that were free, my family didn't really take part in that stuff when we were in the city. So my mom moved us out to the suburbs because she wanted us to have a better life and make better choices than the rest of my cousins were. With that being said, I have an understanding of what it is and what it's like to live in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, in an underserved, underprivileged neighborhood and underprivileged schools. One day I was working at a children's hospital in the emergency department, and there was a car accident. There were two kids in the back. Both got brought into our trauma bay, and our trauma bay has 2 beds. So we split up, and we're taking care of both these kids at the same time. The parents showed up after we had already initiated care. And one of the kids, she wasn't speaking, but she was obviously at an age where one would be able to speak, right? So everyone's thinking brain injury, right? We got to scan her head. We got to see what's going on. She might be bleeding. We don't know what's happening. Meanwhile, the other kid, who was younger than her, is talking her butt off, won't shut up, right? So dad shows up, and the doctors come out and say, hey, do any of your children have medical problems? Do they take any medication? Is there any reason why they would be behaving differently? And the dad said, no, everything's fine. Like they've been at school, everything's fine. That one over there, though, she moved different. And immediately I knew what he meant, because in Black culture, and specifically Chicago culture, it's very common to say, if someone does something that's not what is considered the norm, we say, oh, they move different. Oh, I don't like the way they move, right? And the physicians, who are very young, right, white men, white cis men, who all they know is the 4 years of residency that they just completed and medical terminology, they go back into the trauma room and they start moving her arms around and moving her legs, trying to figure out what movement is different, right? Because they took his statement literally. And so I grabbed one of the doctors, took him to the dad, and I said, you said she moved different. How? Tell me, like, is there something wrong with her neurologically? Oh yeah, she had a stroke when she was a baby. She doesn't talk. And everyone was like, okay, all right, she doesn't talk. It's okay, right? And so we were able to move forward with our assessment and take care of her properly. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but if we didn't get that information, we would have gone on thinking that something was wrong with this little girl neurologically, right? So what would we have done? We would have done x-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, neurology consult, get the brain doctors down here, let's see what's going on, right? How much money do you think that costs, right? You think the family had some nice private insurance that would take care of that right away? Absolutely not, right? So when we're thinking about all of these factors that are involved with the people that we're taking care of, all of that must be considered. So, see, I told you I just talk. Hold on. All right. So thank you. So as a Black nurse, right, I'm able to understand Black experiences differently, right? Just as a white nurse is able to understand white experiences a little bit differently. As a queer person, I'm able to understand the queer experience. I'm able to understand the nuances of being a queer patient. And I'm able, oh, you're so sweet. Oh, I thought this was mine. Was it somebody else's? Uh-oh. It's mine now. Uh-oh. And so in my practice as a nurse is grounded in the fact that I am a Black woman, right? I am a queer woman. And so it's very important to use that in my practice, right? So when I'm taking care of somebody, I took care of a woman who, she was acting weird. I don't date men, but this woman and the man, something was off about them. And I could tell, but I could not put my finger on it. And so I said, let me take you to the bathroom. You look like you have to go to the bathroom. And let's go. So I took her to the bathroom and I locked the door behind me. I said, what's up? There's something happening here. There's something going on. I don't know what it is, but there's something, right? She was there for an assault, and the story had been she was assaulted by some, group of people that weren't her friends. They were going back and forth. The story didn't make any sense at all, right? And usually when that's the case, there's something more insidious that's going on. So we're in the bathroom, and she tells me that man that's sitting next to me in that room beat the hell out of me. And he's sitting in here this entire time to make sure that I don't tell anybody that he hurt me. I'm scared to go home with him. I don't want to go home with him. Please help, right? And so I feel like it could have been easy for me to dismiss the energy or whatever, the feeling that I had in that room. But as a woman, I feel like I have a sense of understanding when it comes to that discomfort and knowing when someone seems like they feel like they can't talk. And I'm not saying that men can't understand this or that men wouldn't recognize this, but I do feel like I have a different perspective, and that perspective aids in the care that I provide to the people that I care for at the hospital. So that's me. That's who I am. Now, let's talk about why I wrote the book. So for a long time as a nurse, especially as a new nurse, I think that I internalized everything that was going on around me, right? So that woman that was being abused, the people that were being mistreated, I feel like I took that home with me every single day. And I really did find some relief from that when I started going to therapy, but there was still this missing piece, right? Because although I was sharing these troubles that I was having with my therapist, in my head, I'm thinking, how is that going to help change anything, right? So I journaled. I journaled like crazy. I journaled every shift when I went home. I journaled to decompress. I journaled as an outlet. I journaled so that I could make sure that I didn't forget things that happened, because my memory is not what it was when I was 7 or 8. And I really thought for a second that maybe I should just reach out to somebody and figure out what can I do with these journals, right? These journal entries, or can we make a class, or can we do some sort of continuing education? But the issue with continuing education and classes and things like that when it comes to nurses and the hospital is that it's too easy. All we have to do is go on a computer, click next on a module, and keep clicking it until we're at the end, and then take a 10-question quiz. And if we get them all wrong, that's okay, because you just take it again. And at the end of the day, if someone isn't actually attempting to learn from that, they're not going to. And so I decided to take all my journal entries and put them in a manuscript, and then take that manuscript and send it to publishers all over the world to see if somebody would help me in telling my story. And it's not just my story. This is the story of a lot of people. This is y'all's story, right? I promise you that not one of you have been in a situation where you have been othered or treated poorly or treated differently because of the way that you look, because of the way that you talk, because of how much money you have, because of who you're around. We are all treated differently and unfairly in various situations. And so my stories are not just my stories, they're all of our stories, and they're all of my patients' stories. And it was really important for me to open up these conversations so that we could find a way forward, so that we could find a way to change this. I know that before I'm gone, I'm not going to completely restructure medicine, right? And rid all of our hospitals and medical systems of implicit bias and discrimination. But I think that by telling these stories, we can help each other move in a better direction. I hope that makes sense. So, one of the themes of the book is the fact that I am a nurse in various segregated cities. And, obviously, Chicago even is an incredibly segregated city. And you can tell that, as I wrote in the book, just by taking a run or a bike up and down the lake. You go to the north side of Lake Michigan, and it's clean and pristine, and there's nothing on the ground. But the further south you go, there's, trash and broken glass and things like that because they haven't been picked up over the various months. So Chicago, although it is incredibly diverse, and I love that, Chicago is incredibly segregated. As a nurse, I have worked in incredibly segregated cities, and I don't get to choose my patients. My patients don't get to choose me, right? One of the stories that stuck out the most in my book is the vignette called Can I Have a White Nurse? And I'm going to tell you two stories. I'm going to tell you, can I have a white nurse? And I'm going to tell you the N-word. I was told by a good friend of mine not to swear today, and I'm going to do my best, okay? I have a potty mouth. So, Can I Have a White Nurse was a story that I wrote in this book. And I was actually working in Southern California, and I was training another nurse. And the nurse that I was training she was white, but along the lines somewhere there was someone that was Hispanic in her family, and so she's mixed. All right, she has like darker hair, but if you looked at her, she would just look like a white woman with dark hair to you. Okay, so that's just to set the scene. We're running around together in the ER. It's very busy. COVID was a thing, and I walk into this patient's room and I said, "Hey, I'm Brittany. I'm going to be your nurse today. I'm going to be taking care of you." My normal introduction. And, I smile what I can with my mask on, and I still wear my mask at work. So the woman raises her hand, and I said, "You over there?" Like, what? You? I said, "Yes." And she said, "Can I have a white nurse?" And it was so matter of fact. And I said, "We're fresh out. We don't have any more." Sorry. And before that, I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Caucasian." And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right. Thank you for rewording it." I was like, "What'd you say? Caucasian?" All right, sis. So I looked behind me, and I really did. I looked behind me to see, like, okay, who's out there? What I got for her? Nope, nothing. We're out. I said, "So how do you want to move forward?" And she's like, "I guess I'm stuck with you." I was like, "All right, I guess you are." Anyway, so we're going to draw your blood. We're going to do this. And we were able to just move on, right? Whatever racism lives inside that woman, it is very matter of fact, and she's not doing anything to try to hide it, right? She wanted a white nurse. I couldn't give her one. She was like, "All right, well, I guess let's do this." And we were able to just move forward. Taking care of her wasn't uncomfortable because we set our expectations, right? You want a white nurse? I don't have a white nurse. I'm a black nurse. I'm going to take care of you. So we're going to move forward or not. And at that point, I'll give the patient an option. If you don't want me to take care of you, fine. I'll go find the charge nurse. We'll figure something out. We'll find you the whitest nurse we can. It's that Asian nurse. So no, it was weird, right? And but I have had times where patients have been incredibly belligerent to me, and it's not just them saying something and then us moving forward. It's them continuing to be belligerent or call me racial slurs and things like that. And so one of the stories I tell in the book is a girl who was confused. She was a little confusey because she was using some drugs, and the ER that I was working at didn't have doors on the inside. The patient rooms were just curtains, a bunch of curtains, so many curtains. Oh my God! So each room had 1, 2, 3 curtains, right? Because it's back wall, and then curtains on either side, and the curtain in the front. But usually everyone's front curtain was just open. So I could look and see everyone's room. Okay, there you go. This girl, she's acting funny, she's over there. Old white man minding his business over there, okay? Turn around, I turn back around, she's on top of him. And I said, oh, absolutely not. So, what? So me, a couple of the nurses, security, we go get this girl, we peel her off this poor man, and he's, just having a good time. And we get her back to the bed, and we're explaining to her, you can't climb on people. That's not okay, right? You can't do that here. I understand you're bored, we're trying to get the drugs out of you, but you can't be sitting on people's laps. You can't straddle random patients. And she called me a monkey, and then proceeded to call me the N-word with a hard R. And I laughed it off. I was irritated, right? But I laughed it off because she's whatever she thinks about me is what she thinks about me. She's under the influence, right? So all of her truths are coming out. But later on, she asked me for an apple juice, and hospital apple juice. Hospital apple juice is good. Then listen, I like apple juice, but hospital apple juice is different. I don't know what they put in it. I don't care what they put in it. It's delicious. She asked me for an apple juice, and I got her orange juice, and that is nasty. Hospital orange juice is disgusting. But I'm like, you're being a dick, all right? You're not getting apple juice. And normally I wouldn't do that. I felt bad, but at the same time I didn't feel bad because you're mean. That's not nice to call people monkeys and the N-word, right? So being a black nurse in segregated areas, and I'm generally either the only black nurse or one of few, especially in the ER. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I feel like a lot of black nurses don't go into emergency medicine for whatever reason, but I always find myself being the minority. I've never been to a hospital where there's more black nurses in the ER than white nurses or white adjacent nurses. So, but it can look, there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum of racism and discrimination that exists in medicine. And I feel like I've had a good run of the spectrum. So I wanted to talk about the ways that nursing is failing. And really, I just wanted to touch on the fact that nurses are expected to do a lot of work, right? They're expected. One of the hospitals that I actually quit after, I think it was 2 days, maybe 1, I don't know. It was the first and only hospital I've ever quit on a contract. I've never canceled a contract. As a travel nurse, you usually work 13-week contracts, and then you can extend it and stay a little bit longer. And no matter how miserable I was, I am a very stubborn person. I will finish that contract because there's nothing that can happen that'll make me want to just up and leave or quit on these patients, right? Texas, I went to San Antonio, Texas, and the hospital that I was working at, the nurses had 8 patients per nurse, and generally in the ER. Generally 3 to 5 is the norm for us in the emergency department. I was expected to care for 8 patients on my first day. My preceptor had to take his own 8 patients because they didn't have enough nurses for him and I to work side by side, which is normally what I'll do on my first day, is just work in tandem with another nurse, just so I can get a lay of the land. They said, no, you'll have that pod, he'll have the next pod, so you'll be close to each other, but you'll have your own patients. But that wasn't the issue. The issue is when they told me we didn't get lunch. Listen, I gotta eat. 12 and a half hours, especially taking care of 8 patients, COVID patients, right? We're gowning in and we're donning in, donning off, and wearing our PPE was exhausting, and taking care of that sheer number of patients at a time in a large ER, running back and forth, getting meds, things like that, was exhausting. And to tell me that I can't take 30 minutes for myself to eat, drink, use the restroom, for me, that was unacceptable. So that was the one contract that I ever quit. But that is the norm for so many nurses, right? In various departments. I don't know what it's like outside of the emergency department, but I'm certain that there are nurses who are expected to work double-digit hours without taking time for themselves. Nurses are not given the time to recoup, to recharge, or to rest. And on top of all of that, nurses are not paid well. So what they're doing is they're picking up overtime, right? And overtime is usually another 12-hour shift. So instead of working 3 12-hour shifts, they're working 4 or 5. And so I come across these nurses who are completely burnt out after 3-4 years of working, and it's because of the amount of work that they've had to do to maintain their life. So there's a lot to be done, and you're probably wondering, like, what is there to be done? Well, for me, I think that it's important to have these conversations, right? That's step number one, because like I said in the beginning, a lot of folks have absolutely no idea what's happening inside of our hospitals. They have no idea what your doctors and nurses are saying about you when you leave the room, right? And so having these conversations makes you more aware. And some of the recommendations that I always make to people is, because this, I cannot stress enough that these stories are not just for me, right? These are all of our stories. One of the recommendations that I always make to folks is that whenever you go to the doctor's office or to the hospital, but especially the hospital, right? Especially in emergency situations in the emergency department, to always have a second person. Always have a person with you. Don't go by yourself. I have witnessed just the shift in behavior when someone is by themselves versus when there's a family member or a friend or anybody with them. There's just a change. Folks feel like, I feel like they think that they can be lax, right? Or be subpar in the care that they provide when the patient's alone, because who's going to check them, right? But when there's a family member, a witness, there's a second set of eyes, there's a second set of ears, right? And so that's 2 people to hold them accountable versus 1. So if you ever have to go to the hospital, especially if you ever have to go to the emergency department, I highly, highly recommend that you take somebody with you. Okay? Please? Thank you. Anyway, what was I talking about? I got on my soapbox. Oh, what can we do? Right, yes. We can listen, right? We can educate ourselves and others. There's always room for us to learn. And when I'm working with newer nurses, there's a few books that I recommend to them. One of them is obviously Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. Another book is called The Wall of Silence by Rosemary Gibson, in which she actually interviewed families who have had events at the hospital or in medicine where folks have been harmed, people have died, wrong medicines were given, surgeries were botched, things like that, and people weren't held accountable. And so The Wall of Silence is a tribute to all these families who experience this. Meanwhile, their medical providers are protected, right, by this code that you're not going to be held accountable, right? Because you're doing the best you can, or because look at all the people you've saved versus the couple that you've harmed, things like that. And we see these documentaries on Netflix, right, about these doctors who have, oh my God, just obliterated surgeries, and no one caught anything until multiple people have died. And I just feel like if we're holding each other accountable, we're holding the people that are caring for us accountable, we can get to a place where we don't get to that point, where we're not having documentaries about doctors who have worked all over the country and all over the globe, right, and have done surgeries with fake tracheas that, weren't even approved by the FDA and things like that. Stuff like that is happening every single day. And it might not be on that large of a scale, but people are being wronged in the hospital every single day. I took care of a little girl, and she was a little white girl, right? So you would assume she's good, she's safe, right? White doctor, white patient, white mom who was anxious, right? She was anxious because her daughter kept passing out at school. I'd be anxious. I don't even have kids. But if my dog was passing out at daycare, I would be upset, right? She brings her into the ER. She's like, I don't know what, she keeps fainting. I don't know why. The doctor says, that I hear the doctor come out and say, oh, that mom is just a ball of anxiety, right? And he's not talking to me, he's talking to somebody else, but I'm listening because I'm always listening. He said, that mom is a ball of anxiety. I bet there's nothing wrong with this kid. I highly doubt she's even passing out. She's probably anxious too, right? So, did they do any blood work? Nope. Did they do any tests on her heart? Nope. And so I slid into the room, slid in there, and I talked to mom. I said, can you tell me what's going on? I know you don't know me, and you don't have to tell me, but can you tell me what's going on? She told me, my little girl keeps passing out at school, so much so she's hitting her head on the concrete at recess, right? She's playing and then boom, she's down. And so I went and had a conversation with the doctor, and I said, hey, would you be open to putting a monitor on this little girl, heart monitor? I said, what harm would that do, right? We can put it on for a week, go back after the week and check it, see if anything weird happened. Oh, I don't know, Brittany, I think she's just anxious. I don't think she's just anxious. The little girl is just sitting there. She's just chilling. She's on her iPad. She didn't care. She didn't give a shit about I was so close. Just one, right? Just one. All right, tell my people. I'm sorry. She doesn't care about what's happening, right? She's chilling. Little girl was chilling. And so I said, I don't think that she's anxious. I understand mom is anxious because her only child keeps passing out. But I don't think it's fair to assume that the little girl is just anxious and that's all, right? We're just calling it that and telling her to follow up a cardiology, outpatient next week or the week after, whenever they have an appointment, right? Until then, best of luck. Hopefully she doesn't fall anywhere, right? So I was able to convince the doctor to put the monitor on the little girl. Do you know, a week later, and first of all, I have a Facebook, but it's only for my grandma because my grandma, she's on Facebook every single day. She loves to see my little pictures, even though it's usually profanity or something like that. And I'll post something and swear, and she'll go, "Grandma loves you." And I'm like, "Grandma loves you," right? So I'm on Facebook because I love my grandma. But this woman went on Facebook and she found me, the mom. And she said, "Brittany, I need you to know, first of all, I'm not trying to be weird, right? I know I found you on Facebook. You were right about my daughter. She had POTS. Pediatric orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. I think that's what it means. Postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. So every time the girl changed positions, her heart rate went crazy and she went down. How were they able to figure that out? The monitor. She was so grateful. She said she didn't feel heard by anybody else that was there. She felt like nobody believed her. And I think it's unfair, I almost said BS. I think it's unfair that we have to act a certain way in order for people to believe the severity of something, right? And so that looks different for everybody. So this white woman who, in my head, should be safe from discrimination in medicine, she was discriminated against solely because she was an anxious white woman, right? So assumptions were made, biases were out there. And they were ready to just send her packing. And she drove 2 hours for that to the emergency department because they live in a small town that didn't have specialty doctors. So she came to the place that she knew had specialty doctors. Nobody is safe, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Nobody is safe from the biases that doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners, nurses carry with them every day. And that could cost us our life, quite literally. And so that is another reason why having these conversations is so important. I in no way wrote the book with the intent to just complain. I joke about that, but I wrote the book so that we can give each other the opportunity to have a different perspective, right? Everyone sees healthcare and medicine through a different lens, and I figured that it would be helpful to give folks the opportunity to see it through my lens, and that way we might be able to really work towards some change. What are your thoughts?
You probably have a bunch of other nurses back you up.
True. That is so true.
I'm hearing you like, oh yeah, oh yeah. And
Yes.
I'm like, wow, you wrote a book about it, and I just like would go home and cry.
Yeah.
When I finally
Same.
retired, I thought, good rhythm.
Yeah.
You know, then there's the baton, and there you
Exactly. And so at some point it has to change, right? It has to change. I don't want the generation after me to deal with the exact same issues that I'm dealing with now. And there has to be a place where where the buck stops, right? Tell me.
So, if you look at this audience, and in particular, I know I've read articles about bias towards elderly people,
Ooh.
and I know that there's some people that are some hospitals that are special this or that, but that's obviously not the standard.
Definitely. So the recommendation I made earlier stands for this, right? My grandma does not go to the doctor without me, and if she does have to go to the doctor without me, she puts me on the phone, and I stay on the phone with her throughout her entire appointment. And I feel like a lot of healthcare providers are threatened by this, and I think you all know what I mean, right? Where they feel like because the patient is making sure that somebody else is present. It gives them a sense of insecurity. It makes them feel like, oh, the patient doesn't trust me, right? They want somebody else to be present. When in fact, it's a very smart protective measure. So always having someone with you at your appointments is going to be really important. Having your phone with you with all of your contacts in it is going to be really helpful as well. I feel like I've taken care of folks where they assume that there's nobody to call, right? There's nobody that can be there with them or support them. And so decisions are made, right, based on the medical providers and not based on the patient's needs and wants. So that's also going to be very important. Even if it's a physical card of having, the 3 or 4 closest people to you and their phone numbers, just so we know who we can call, especially given that information should be in our electronic health record, but a lot of times it's not, especially if you find yourself in a space where you're not usually at. You're just kind of a new patient, unknown, and they have no information saved on you. So I recommend keeping a card with the phone numbers of the people that you would want us to call if something were to happen to you, and never make medical decisions without having someone who you love close to you, with you, on the phone with you, present in some way. I'm going to open it up to questions. Tell me. Yes, for the hospitals who have a union, right? It's tough, and it's also kind of a double-edged sword, because when I was in California, one of the nurses that I worked with, he's the one in the book who told a patient, "That's why you got shot. Shut up. That's why you got shot." That gentleman, I had so many issues with him over the year that I was there, and having the union sort of protected him, even though he was blatantly disrespectful and also harmful in his work. He was still able to keep his job for a while because of the union. And ultimately, when it got to the point where they almost terminated him, he just quit. So the unions are helpful, right? At the hospital I'm working, University of Chicago, the union is always working to make sure that we have equitable work practice. Like the doctors have free parking in our garages. Meanwhile, the nurses have to pay a ridiculous amount of money when we already make less, right? Or we can park on the street, and hopefully you make it on time. Hopefully you make it across the street in time, or hopefully your car doesn't get vandalized. So the union was working towards getting us equitable parking so that we could afford it, not spending half our paycheck on it, things like that. And the University of Chicago actually almost went on strike because of a pay issue, but the hospital was able to resolve it before the strike. Yeah, it is, the union is helpful, but if you're not part of the union, you're not protected by the union, right? The union costs money. If you work part-time or per diem or registry or your contract, you're not protected by the union. So there's a lot of moving parts, but it is helpful. It's complicated, I know. Yeah.
I have a microphone if anyone else has a question.
I'm going to take a sip of my water. Which one? That's a good. I think it's third. Is there Third Place Books here? In Seattle. Okay. Okay. Well, hopefully they have it. But I always tell folks to get it from my publisher, Common Notions, because it's most affordable there. And obviously it supports the work that they do, which is social justice work. So any money that they make, they put back into the organization. And yes, Common Notions Press. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Let me know if they have it. Yeah, I hope they do. That'd be nice. Every time I go to a bookstore and I see it, I have a little scream fest. She's right up here. Oh, bet.
How do your coworkers feel about the book? I mean, you're in a line of nurses here, and we don't know how many times we've all said, you said it, we've all said,
I could write a book about this.
story. Someone would know what happened behind these walls, so.
And you should. You should. And they will. My coworkers have been overwhelmingly supportive. Yes, so I actually got I got a message from the guy who accidentally shocked my patient with the defibrillator. And he said, I want my book autographed, especially the chapter where you wrote about me shocking your patient, right? Listen, everyone who I dissed in that book deserved it, and they know it, right? So, I've had incredible support. And honestly, for example, the story that I told about the gentleman that was, and I apologize if you haven't read it yet. I'm not trying to make an inside joke or anything like that, or make you feel like you're not a part of this conversation. So I'm going to do my best to tell the whole story as it was told in the book. But a gentleman came to the hospital with his girlfriend. She brought him in a wheelchair. It's a big black dude. I mean, big, like 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", I don't know. And he's ripping his shirt off. And he's screaming, help, I can't breathe, help. And he's sweaty, he's wet, and he just looks a mess, right? There's obviously something wrong with him. Well, the nurse up front was a white man, and I think I wrote, was he a man, woman? I don't know. I changed so many genders in the book for privacy that at this point, I'm like, was it a man, woman? So the nurse assumed that the patient was on drugs and that he was just super high, and that's why he was coming in. And the town that I was working in did have a lot of drugs, but it was very obvious that this gentleman was not on drugs. There was something wrong with him. And so he took his time. He's like chewing his gum, popping his gum, checking him in and telling him to calm down, right? And all this stuff, and put your mask on. And I saw him on the security camera in the back. I was in the back. I was not in the front. But you can see the triage, the entrance on the little monitor. And I see this man. I'm like, oh, damn. Sorry, thank you. I'm like, he doesn't look good, right? So I book it. I grab the charge nurse. I literally grab her by the wrist. We run to the front and we get dude, bring him to the back, put him on the monitor, and he's in this incredibly fast heart rhythm, and like over 200. And that's why he was sweaty and looking crazy and can't breathe because his heart's beating way too fast, right? SVT. So that nurse later on, he said, "Hey, did I F up?" And I said, "Nah." Right? And obviously he asked me for a reason, right? And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because if that was a white man, you would not have acted like that. You would have not slow rolled triage, told him to calm down. Everything about your behavior and demeanor was dismissive. And he almost died because of it." Right? And so then he goes and tells on me for calling him racist. And I'm like, that's funny. Even that dude was like, "Man, your book is amazing." And the stories were incredible. And he didn't apologize, but he's like, you call people out, and that's good. And that's as close as an apology I'm going to get from him. And I don't need an apology for him dismissing a black man. I need an apology for you ratting on me for saying that you were wrong. You shouldn't have asked me if you were wrong in the first place. Yeah, truly though, folks have been very supportive, and I think that this was the come to Jesus meeting that we needed. And the hospital that I work at now, because I spend so much time, I'm finishing my doctorate, obviously, but because I spend so much time working kind of all over the place, I'm only at the hospital once a week. And so every time I come, they say, "Oh, you got famous and now you don't know how to work anymore." But I'm actually working like 7 days a week, so. But it's great. What are you going to do with your doctorate? I don't know. I want to start a nonprofit in Chicago. I want to do mobile health care. I want to do community education. I want to do community outreach. There's just so much that is missing in the city, especially for our homeless population. Like, we have barbers that drive around the city and give free haircuts out to the homeless folks to make them, feel better about their hygiene and feel more presentable, and maybe have the courage to go on job interviews and things like that. There's a lot of resources in the city, but not when it comes to healthcare. When it comes to healthcare, the only resource is the emergency department. That's what our poor folks and our homeless folks rely on. And so there's got to be something better than that. So I really want to get like a truck, a big truck, and set up chairs and do blood pressure checks, do education, make sure folks are taking their meds, and just sort of that community outreach, community education type thing. I think that'll help turn things around, especially in the poor areas, especially where I grew up. Yes. Oh, yeah. We have a lot of federally qualified healthcare centers.
I work for one here, and we have buses.
What?
It just parks in front of the Salvation Army in Bremerton,
Oh, we don't have that.
and they go out in various places.
That's amazing. So then maybe I could just write grants for all of them.
Picks up county, we're
Yeah.
backwoods here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have fewer OBGYNs than any other county in the state.
Mm-hmm.
We have fewer primary care providers than any other county in the state. But we've got buses to take care of them.
That's amazing. We don't have that. They should be. Listen, I'll tell them. I'm going to put it in my notes right now, okay? And when I have a doctorate, maybe they'll listen to me. Buses. Exactly. So I got to find me a white man to talk for me. What'd you say? Yes, exactly. Listen, I have a lot in my corner, okay? One of the doctors that I work with, he's middle-aged white man, super tall, super gay. I love him. I actually wrote about him in this book. I've worked with him for over a decade. He went to a fancy gala with his suit and tie with all his rich friends, and he saw, what are they? Raffles. They were doing raffles. And one of the raffles was for box seats for a Chicago Sky basketball game and a signed jersey in basketball. And he took all his raffle tickets and put them in that that raffle for me, and he won. So next week, Wednesday, Thursday, the 15th, the 16th, we're going to a Sky game. And he's like, I entered that raffle for you, not for me. And just knowing that folks like that care about me in that way is incredible. So I have good people around me. Yes! Oh, nice. Yeah, the audiobook is cool. I did not narrate. No. No. Do I look like I would stay on script? Absolutely not. Sorry, go ahead.
So, my first question is, how long have you been in practice?
2017, since 2017, as a nurse. Before that, I was a firefighter at EMT. Yeah. Yeah, for a while.
So I'd like to hear you talk about, as you enter the, way back then,
Yeah.
and what you'll witness, what, is just more apparent to you, and how people and how parents feel were communicating with trans people, queer people, perceptions about that,
Yeah.
from kind of when you came in the field
And now.
where we are now.
When I was first a nurse, I was working at a tiny hospital, community hospital in the ER. But I was living in Chicago, but I moved. I took the job because in 2017, nobody wanted to hire a brand new nurse in their emergency department. It just wasn't a thing, right? You had to start off in like med surge or something else, and then work your way to ER, ICU, and things like that. But I again, stubborn. I wanted to start in the ER. And so I said, if I have to move an hour and a half outside of the city to do that, then I will. And I did. The town was probably over 99% white, right? I was the black nurse, the only black nurse. And so that in of itself made me just hyper aware all the time. But on top of that, I was working at a Catholic hospital. Yeah. That was interesting. And so one day, one of the doctors came out of a patient's room and he shut the door behind him, but his back was against the door. And he said, I just don't understand when I walk into a room and a woman is saying, my wife this, my wife that. And he was just so frustrated about it. And at that point, I had been a nurse for like 2 months, right? And so it made me uncomfortable and I wanted to scream. I wanted to do a lot of things, but at that time, I didn't feel like I was in any position to say something, right? I ended up saying something. I did. As you can see, I have a hard time not. But nothing was done, right? Because this dude was a medical director. He was the emergency department medical director. No one sort of messed with him, all that. The queer community was surprisingly present in that town that I was working in. But again, working at a Catholic hospital, there were a lot of judgmental physicians and a lot of judgmental staff. And unfortunately, because it was a Catholic hospital, whenever queer folks were dealing with something or whenever unmarried folks were dealing with something with their kids, the chaplain or whoever it was that would come down and talk to the other nuclear families, the heterosexual families with kids, they wouldn't come down and talk to these families, right? So they were just left to figure it out on their own without any support. So that's one of the things that I first noticed. Now and recently, I feel like I see a lot more trans patients in the emergency department, and I feel like it's become incredibly confusing for staff for some reason to look at a pronoun and to say it. It's hard for some reason, right? So when patients tell us their pronouns, we put it in the computer so that it's there, so that nobody can make mistakes, and we all make mistakes, right? But doing everything that we can to prevent that, but intentionally and frequently, repeatedly misgendering patients is something that I see a lot. And if they don't misgender the patient flat out, they talk about the patient at the nurse's station, talk about them poorly, or talk about how they don't understand trans folks and how this is also confusing for them now. And everybody wants to have a different pronoun. Everybody wants to be a they, them. These are the things that I hear at the nurse's station, right? From the people who we trust to take care of us. And that's why I take vitamin C and stuff, because I don't want to get sick. Because I don't listen. I don't want to get sick. Now, one of my recurring fears, I think I talked about this in the book. I couldn't tell you, but one of my recurring fears is that I'm gonna pass out or something, right? Low blood sugar, I don't know, anything, and end up laying on a concrete, surface, and people are gonna think that, oh well, I'm just some druggie that overdosed, right? Or I'm just some gang member that got into a fight with somebody else, and they're just going to disregard me and not do anything to try to help me. And that fear is real. And without me talking, right, and looking at me, you're only left to make whatever assumptions you're going to make based off the way that you've grown up, based off the way that you've lived your life and your beliefs. And for trans folks, I feel like that's every single day, especially in medicine. And because of that, they're not going to the hospital. Trans folks are dying at home and getting sicker at home because they're afraid to be seen at the hospital. And that's not me making assumptions or being dramatic. This is proven by research. Studies have shown that the trans patients avoid the doctor. They do what they have to do for their hormone therapy, right, and things like that. But if it's not absolutely necessary, they're not going. And that's sad, right? That's terrifying. I'm a lot more vocal now than I was before, believe it or not. So there, it's thank you. It's 8:00, so I'm gonna make this kind of quick because I gotta get the ferry. But anyway,
Why are you going back tonight? You can't rest. You gotta stay from 6 in the morning and going back tonight. I mean, brutality.
I know, it's bad. I know, but I have a 12-hour shift coming up, and so yes, I have to get back. I know.
What are you doing now?
I do anesthesia some days, ER some days, school most days, writing. No. God, no. I do procedural sedation with fentanyl and Versed and ketamine. Love ketamine. Sorry.
As white providers, not like what
Assumptions without information. And what I mean by that is one of the fairly young white doctors that I worked with made an assumption that a patient didn't want birth control, right? She had been there for some sort of genital urinary complaint. The doctor did testing, things like that. But she assumed that the patient didn't want birth control because she wasn't on birth control already. And she was a young black girl, the patient. And so she's at the nurse's station talking to another doctor saying, I can't believe this girl didn't know what a uterus was. And I said, she didn't know what a uterus was. Did you ask her about birth control? And she said, no. And I just looked at her and I let her sit in it. She was uncomfortable. And then she went back to the room and had a conversation and learned that the girl's mom had passed away. The dad doesn't know anything about birth control, right? So these conversations aren't had. So assuming that she didn't want birth control because she wasn't on birth control already, instead of asking the questions, the clarifying questions to figure out, what's the situation here and how can I help? Things like that. Making assumptions about people of color, making assumptions about patients who come from lower socioeconomic classes, one of the gentlemen, God, I just tell stories. One of the gentlemen that was in the emergency department had tooth pain. And so he was using baking powder or baking soda, one of the two, to relieve his pain. This is something that I learned that Black people do all the time. I had the privilege of having a dentist that my mom could take me to whenever I was having dental pain, right? So I didn't know this, but I knew it by the time this happened. Well, the gentleman got a shot of bupivacaine, a numbing medicine, in his gums to help with the pain by the doctor. He felt great. He hadn't slept for days before this, but because the pain was relieved, he fell asleep in the ER. One of the security guards walked by, see him sleeping, he's drooling. They see the bag of powder on his exactly. You already know where I'm going with this. Yeah. So they called the rest of the security guards. They said, come take his stuff. He's on drugs. That's why he's sleeping like that. That's why he's drooling all over the place. We got to get him in the psych unit. We got to figure out what's going on here. So he wakes up. He's confused. He's upset. They're taking off his clothes. Why are you taking off my clothes? And he stands up. And I'm telling you, the taller they are. He's like 6'3", and he's pissed. So I walk into all the commotion. I tell him, hold on, like just hold on. I'm like, hold on, right? Super tall, and I am not. And I turned around, I said, what is going on? So they tell me, he's got a bag of drugs, he's high as hell, he's sleeping, he can't just sleep here, and all this. I said, that's baking powder, 1. 2, you can't just come in here and start taking off his clothes, right? With it, you got to wake him up, tell him, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is what we're going to do right now. And we go back and forth for a minute. He stands back up. I'm like, no, you sit back down. You're too tall. They're going to get upset and tase you, right? And as a Black man, a big Black man, right, he's a threat to them already before he even says anything. I end up taking the bag to them, showing them it's not, I don't know what you think this is. I don't know drugs well, but I don't know what drug you think baking powder is. And they were like, okay, he can go, but he has to go now. Okay. So I said, give me his clothes. I give him his clothes. I shut the door. I shut the curtain. I stay in the room with him. And I'm literally like guarding this man's room so that he can get dressed so he can go without any further issues, right? And I told him that I'm sorry to say this, but you, as a Black man, as a big Black man, you cannot yell at these security guards. They already see you as a threat. You getting upset and screaming at them is only going to make things worse. They are going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let them hurt you. So I said, just let me talk, right? And you be quiet. And in doing that, I use my privilege as a nurse, right, to protect him. And all I'm asking is that people who have privilege use that privilege to keep other people safe. Use that privilege to make sure that everybody has the best possible outcome, especially when there are people trying to make sure that they don't. Thank you. Thank y'all.